Welcome everybody this afternoon to an event organized by the American Nuclear Society's Risk-Informed, Performance-Based Principles and Policy Committee. We call it RP3C. My name is Prasad Kadambi and I'm chair of RP3C. The purpose of RP3C is to help modernize ANS standards. Modernization has come to mean that risk-informed and performance-based methods are employed to overcome the difficulties that we all have encountered with purely deterministic and prescriptive approaches and methods. We've been calling these new approaches and methods RIPB for short. The Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act specifically mentions RIPB. If you look around, you will find it hard to locate any place other than ANS, outside of NRC of course, that has as much information and guidance on RIPB. Overall, there is a lot of guidance available on RIPB, but most people have not had reason to become familiar with the information. This is primarily because the conventional approaches still dominate most things we do, including standards development. RP3C has been having these community of practice events regarding RIPB and associated methods such as systems engineering, to enable practitioners to share their knowledge and experience. We've been scheduling these sessions for the last Friday of each month. Today we will be hearing from Linn about a new standard, ANS-30.1. I just want to take a minute. Mark will give you the title of the standard and everything else, but I just want to say from the perspective of RP3C that this is very important for RP3C because the standards board, right from the start of my committee, has said that ANS 30.1 is the pilot on which how RP3C works will be demonstrated, as it were. So I look forward to Mark's presentation and your inputs into what he has to say. So with that, Mark, please go ahead.
Thank you, Prasad. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be here today. Basically, this is a new standard for incorporating the objectives of risk-informed performance-based into new reactor designs. That's the title of the standard. And today, next slide, Pat. Today we got the goals of this presentation today is provide some contextual history for ANS 30.1, and there'll be a substantial part of the presentation will be residing in this point. Because I think it's critical. It's very important to see what has happened over the last 25 years, because that's how long this has been going on to generate is the genesis for 30.1. It's been going on that long, and that context will enable you better to see the role of ANS 30.1 within the overall standards efforts for advanced reactors. Then we're going to spend some time discussing the purpose of 30.1 and then summarize the very few high-level requirements that are in 30.1. And then we'll elaborate on those, each one a little bit, and try to dispel some of the misconceptions of 30.1 that seem to continue to linger on right now. And then we'll provide, at the end, just a quick summary of the current status of 30.1. Right. History and background. The origins of 30.1 began with ANS 51.1 and 52.1, which are the nuclear safety criteria for PWRs and BWRs respectively. Both these standards were prepared in 1983, and they were to replace the existing standards, and they were also to incorporate additional requirements for equipment classification, plant conditions, and design criteria. In 1993, ANS 5814, Standards and Pressure Integrity Classification Criteria for LWRs. This document was prepared to revise, consolidate, and supersede the safety and pressure integrity classification criteria in 51.1 and 52.1. So at this point in time in 1993, the Standards Authority were seeing, evidently I wasn't privy to that point in time, but obviously there was some discussion on why do we have two standards for light water reactors? Let's just have light water reactor standards instead of a BWR and a PWR. This was obviously the first step in getting that done, because the creation of 5814 to do this. And next slide, Pat. That consolidation, again, this is me projecting what the thinking was at this time. This consolidation of safety and pressure requirements led to the creation of a working group in 1993 for ANS 50.1 called Nuclear Safety Criteria for Light Water Reactors. 50.1 was to revise and consolidate the remaining requirements in 51.1 and 52.1, which was, of course, the deterministic design criteria, into a single document. It was also started addressing the topics of design that were currently under development at that time, and this included PRA. But after 7 revisions of 50.1, comments were unable to be fully resolved, and the project ended in 1994 without publication of an approved standard. With the preparation of 5814 in 1993 superseding the classification parts of 51.1 and 52.1 and the stalled effort on 50.1, the LWR design criteria remained in what were now partial 51.1 and 52.1. Next slide, please. To address this gap, again, the Standards Authority knew they had a gap problem. They had a disconnect. So they reinitiated the ANS 50.1 working group in 2003 and 2011 to try to complete the document. The 2003 group was headed up by Rick Hill, and I was part of that group, and eventually took over the chairmanship of the group. At that time, we worked very diligently trying to get a draft acceptable to everyone, and we were unable to do so. And the reason was that working group was unable to get agreement from the existing reactors that they wanted this document to see the light of day. The primary reason being PRA was still relatively untested in the nuclear power industry. The standards that are now well developed were just at that time beginning to be developed and prepared. So there was a lot of hesitancy on installing PRA type philosophies and methods and information into standards that were in some of these reactors approved licensing basis. They just they weren't comfortable with that. And so as chairman, I recommended to the standards board that we go to 5814 and do an update to 5814 at that time. And maybe that'll give us buy some time to let the PRA standards process work its way through and get those out on the street a little bit longer and be available. Get people more familiar with PRA as a design tool. We did that. 5814 was issued in 2011, and so that again, standards board said, okay, let's go back and do a 2011 reinitiation of 50.1. again, so we had a failed effort in 1993. We had another attempt in 2003 to get 50.1 out, and that was kind of postponed and to 2011. But again, the problem was we could get neither support of the existing reactors or even the advanced reactor designers. They saw no reason for it either. So the second effort of 50.1 failed it was ended in 2014. But the necessity for incorporation of risk-informed performance-based guidance, methods, and information into ANS standards remained a top priority throughout the ANS organization. So this prompted a complete paradigm shift by the ANS Standards Board in how to approach future standards developments. Okay. The ANS Standards Authority at the time was also faced with a significant new challenge in the preparation of standards for advanced reactor designs. And this can be shown by looking at 51.1 and 52.1. By the time 51.1 and 52.1, 1978 had been issued, approximately 67 light water reactors had received their approval for operation. By the 1983 version, an additional 14 were operational. So the foundational design criteria standards for light water power reactors had the experience benefit of approximately 80 operating units from which to draw, quote, standard design practices. The ANS Standard Authority recognized this experience was not available for the development of standards for advanced reactors. And waiting to accumulate that experience was just not considered an option. So they had to think differently. But we couldn't do the way we couldn't do standards the way we did them in the past for advanced reactors. Next one, Pat. With the second abandoned effort of 50.1, it's clear that the approved licenses and extensive operating experience, existing reactors were hesitant to support revisions to ANS standards, which could potentially challenge the status quo. So the Standards Board came to the following conclusions regarding our RIPB guidance methods and informations in putting them into ANS standards. Revisions related to existing standards must be made with care in consideration of the potential impacts on the existing fleet of reactors. And more attention should be made to the inclusion of both deterministic and risk-informed performance-based design requirements during the development of standards for future reactor designs. You had to treat, you could see that there was already consideration that they have to be treated differently. The existing fleet and the new fleet could not be, one size could not fit all. So, Pat. First, the paradigm shift affected the ANS organization. There was an inward-looking change made to create a risk-informed, performance-based principles and policy committee. This was an advisory committee of the Standards Board and provided oversight of ANS plan for implementing risk-informed and performance-based principles into ANS standards. There was also an outward-looking change made to create a joint committee in conjunction with ASME, which is the Joint Committee on Nuclear Risk Management, JCNRM. This committee was tasked for the preparation and maintenance of consensus standards for the completion of risk assessments, including PRA. These organizational changes were to permit risk-informed, performance-based principles and methods to be addressed for all nuclear facilities in a rational and planned manner. Next, Pat. Second, the paradigm shift involved ANS structural changes. The Advanced Initiatives Subcommittee of the Research and Advanced Reactors Consensus Committee was tasked with the development of consensus standards for the design, operation, maintenance, operator selection and training, and quality assurance for new reactors, both light water and non-light water cooled. And then on top of that, secondly, a tiered hierarchy of advanced reactor standards preparation was approved. These structural changes were to permit risk-informed, performance-based principles and methods to be incorporated for advanced nuclear facilities in a broad and appropriately flexible manner. And ANS 30.1 has become of importance in this second set of changes, this hierarchy change. Okay? This is what that hierarchy looks like. I'm only showing 4 tiers. This is basically what would envelop the majority of any standard that could possibly be conceived for the advanced reactors. The tier 1 is the topmost, the highest level, and that's where 30.1 sits, in integrating risk and performance objectives into new reactor safety designs. There's also the possibility, the availability of cross-cutting standards for new reactors, and that sits off to the side as kind of a child of 30.2, which is the categorization and classification of structure system components for new nuclear power plants. And that tier 1, that's basically where I see where the RP3C basically feeds in at that level of tier to provide as an advisory to the standards at the upper levels. Tier 2 is basically designed, is where the technology specific design criteria standards reside. You have the upper level at tier 1 that are technology neutral. The tier 2 is where the technology starts being developed into individual standards. And then you have tier 3. That's where you have the lower level type requirements appearing, your plant design criteria, your reg guides, your standard review plans. And those can be as both design technology specific as well as cross-cutting. So there's again, you're seeing the flexibility that adopted in this hierarchy. You could have, all right, and then tier 4, it drops down another level. This is where the other STOs become involved in the hierarchy. Again, you could have technology specific STO standards, or you could have cross-cutting STO standards. So you can see you got 4 tiers: upper level, technology neutral, the technology specific, the implementing, so to speak, the more detailed implement requirements. And then you have the tier 4, which gets to the other SDOs involved. And this was laid out to the standards board, and they approved it because this was the most flexible way they could see things developing. Because again, we have no experience. These new reactors are being prepared and proposed all the time. So they needed a standards hierarchy to allow them to give them organization and coherence and consistency, but yet be as flexible as possible. You can see in tier 2, we have one of the standards. There's no obligation to adopt any of these standards at all. If you do not wish to have a technology specific standard, there's nothing telling you must have one at the tier 2 level. But there may be some later time where you need some technology specific on materials, or there may be cross-cutting on digital controls that you would want to participate in. So you see this hierarchy is very flexible, very robust, and allows for a wide variety of technologies and standards developments to take place in the future, because it is also easily to be can be easily modified and adapted to whatever need is found to be necessary. All right, Pat? Okay, now let's talk about ANS 30.1 itself. What is ANS 30.1? ANS 31 provides requirements and guidance for the preparation of the lower tier, second level, technology-specific new reactor design standards. It is technology neutral. It is written to guide working group members that are preparing new technology-specific reactor design standards. If there is not a technology-specific standard being developed, you have no need for 30.1. That is its purpose, is to provide requirements and guidance to the working group members, not to the designers themselves. It addresses objectives for incorporating risk and performance-based design information into new reactor safety designs through all stages of the facility life cycle. It supplements traditional design processes by balancing structural and rationalist philosophy of design. Either one of those, structuralist or rationalist, has been discussed quite a while, for several years at the NRC, ACRS, and to the industry. Either one of those by themselves are not fully adequate is not the right word, but they do not fully, they're not robust enough as well as they can be if a balance is provided between the two of them. They feed off each other. And so the 30.1 tries to address a balance between the structuralist and rationalist philosophies of design. Where structuralist is basically the deterministic type, and the rationalist is the PRA type of philosophy of design. It's applicable to single or multiple reactors, as well as broader needs of missions of advanced reactors. Okay. It recognizes the detailed state of practice for advanced reactors is not generally available in the manner of previous large water reactors. So it does not provide a design process. It does not discuss implementation of risk-informed performance-based information for any specific advanced reactor technology. It only specifies process elements that, when integrated into the design process, give assurance that we have a minimum necessary structure of design to achieve the full benefits of a risk-informed performance-based design, regardless of the reactor technology or its application. It requires the use of risk-informed performance-based information in assessing nuclear safety, but it also acknowledges other risks may exist that warrant specific design consideration. Pat?
Yeah, right. You were behind there.
Okay. What is, again, while the state of practice for advanced reactors is not generally available, 50 years of PRA application to current nuclear industry has certainly established the state of practice for the realization of systematic and robust risk-informed performance-based results as derived from the industry-accepted PRA methods. This risk-informed performance-based state of practice is defined in this standard by 4 high-level and relational elements, which are to be applied during the preparation of new reactor design standards. These 4 elements are as follows. The interdisciplinary design process is based on methods and processes of the system engineering discipline, which addresses the need for sound system engineering practices. The development of principal design criteria, which addresses regulatory processes. The defense in depth process, a defense in depth process that is structured and systematic, with decisions based on a coherent system of measurement of need and measurement of adequacy. And then finally, the evaluation of the design is conducted using complete plant response or event sequence information in order to establish competent safety cases from industry accepted hazard analysis processes. Yeah. Let's look at each one of these individually. There's just, like I said, there's very few of them, there's only 4. The system engineering requirement. The requirement is an interdisciplinary design process based on the methods and processes of the system engineering discipline shall be implemented. This requirement is here to provide for a complete life cycle design, for design coherency and consistency, for management and balance of multiple purposes and needs, and focus on the whole system rather than the individual parts. Its minimum process requirements as provided in 30.1 are established requirements, evaluate design options, identify acceptable designs, and track integration of requirements and designs. Those are the minimum requirements that are found in 30.1. No specific system engineering process is recommended or endorsed. All right, second Pat. Principal design criteria requirement. The requirement is the preparation of and compliance with principal design criteria for a proposed new reactor design shall be completed. This is because PDC established design, fabrication, construction, testing, performance requirements for structures, system, and components important to safety. PDCs are required for all LWRs and non-LWRs reactors licensed under 10 CFR Part 50. Requires the proposed PDC to demonstrate its applicability to the public safety as well as fundamental safety concepts such as necessary safety functions and defense in depth. It recommends preparation early in the design process, but acknowledges the criteria may be revised and changed as the design progresses. There's no expectation that you have to you have to establish your PDC for time in perpetuity. Examples are provided, but no PDCs are recommended or endorsed for any specific technology or reactor design. That. Third one is structured and systematic defense in depth. The requirement is a DID process that is structural, which means relationship of parts to the complex whole, systematic, which means it's repeatable, and with the decisions based on a coherent system of measurement of need and adequacy shall be implemented for the evaluation, prevention, and mitigation of hazards. The standard provides 5 attributes that integrate to achieve a robust philosophy of defense in depth. There's also 8 objectives for the use of risk-informed performance-based methods and information in the assessment of DID. It provides an example using the IAEA 5 levels of defense in depth, but this only is an illustration to demonstrate what we mean by structured and systematic defense in depth process. No process for defense in depth evaluation is recommended and endorsed in the standard. Okay. Now the fourth and final one is the event sequence basis assessments. Sequence basis assessments, and then the requirement for that is accidents used for the purposes of licensing shall be derived from a spectrum of plant responses, which include initiator, plant response successes and failures, and a defined end state. The standard discusses the generation of this spectrum in general terms. A detailed PRA is not required or recommended for all design circumstances. The uses of PRA event sequence-based assessments recognize the reactor design will evolve and therefore allows for optimum selection from multiple design options. It also provides recognition that identified successes are just as important as identified failures. It allows a natural transition from design goals to design requirements, and allows and provides realistic risk profiles to be determined. Again, the sequence-based information is a purposed output of industry-accepted risk-informed performance-based methods and analysis. So this is nothing new. Next one. All right, and finally, the last slide is the status. Ballot, status of the 30.1 at this time. The ballot draft is currently undergoing review by the Advanced Initiative Subgroup of RARCC, by RP3C and SCORA. The closing date for the comments on this ballot is September the 4th, 2021. We've had previous reviews in the past, and we had some informal reviews previously conducted, and they generated about 150 comments. Unfortunately, a substantial number of these comments attempted to address topics and concerns that were not within the scope, purpose, and applicability of the standard. The core premise of the standard has not yet been addressed by any comment cycle. That being this is from the standard itself. The full benefits of risk and performance evaluation methods as applied to the design for a new reactor are achieved with the discipline and quantitative evaluation options considered during the design process. The effectiveness of these evaluation methods relies on the presence of 4 process elements that ensure a minimum necessary design process structure is available for these evaluations. These 4 process elements are system engineering process, principal design criteria, structured and systematic defense in depth, event sequence-based assessments. It is hoped that the forthcoming review will provide technical input on this premise. And with that, that concludes my presentation, Pat.
Thank you, Mark. I did just check the chat and I don't see any questions. If
Okay.
anyone would like to go ahead and throw a question or 2 into the chat.
Well, at this point, you can unmute and ask your question also. I'm going to stay muted because there's a thunderstorm here and it's very loud outside. So Pat, please handle the.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, hey, Pat, this is Jim August. Mark, going back to the the 2 definitions you had there, and I forgot what they were now, but essentially you paraphrase them as traditional, deterministic, and newer risk.
Rationalist? Yeah.
Yeah, rationalist, and what was the other one? Deterministic.
Yeah. Oh.
Here's the gist of my question. Are those defined in this standard?
Structuralist.
Structuralist, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Structuralist and deterministic, was it?
No,
Or
not
quantitative?
yet. That basically is it's result of a recent comments from Prasad, actually. And we will start.
All you need to do is tell me if they're defined in the standard 30.1.
Not yet.
Okay, they need to be. That's my comment.
Yes, they're not there yet.
Any other comments? No questions?
Mark, this is Ralph. I'd like to hear from Bill Reckley. Bill, if you don't mind addressing what was presented.
This is Ralph Hill, Mark. I'd just like to say I enjoyed the presentation, especially the background. I wasn't aware of that previously. For those of you who don't know me, I've also contributed to 30.1. And we're also in ASME, I'm leading the development of a standard called Plant Systems Design that is implementing what is being recommended in 30.1.
This is Bill Reckley. Prasad, I didn't have any specific things. I mean, again, I've watched largely from the sidelines as this is developed. I think it's improved over the time, and generally agree with Mark that where we are at the NRC is either of these primary approaches, structuralist or rationalist or deterministic and PRA centered, however you want to characterize it, can lead you to the right answer, but the best is probably a combination of the 2. So I think I have, to be honest, I have yet to read through the standard that's on my list for the weekend, but from what Mark was saying, I didn't really have any additional comments.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this is Jim August here again. I found it very informative. Just as Bill said, I think this has evolved and improved greatly over the years that I've seen it in progress. I actually look forward to seeing this come out as a standard and get completed, because I think it gives good background for people who are working on new standards. So I think it's all great. I think the caution from the history that Mark presented is that we really need to bring this and other standards to fruition by completing them and not getting sidetracked by comments that get us stirred up and starting something new before we finish the old thing. So, I just encourage you to bring this thing to completion.
Thank you, Jim. I do note that Steve Stam's hand is up. Steve?
Yes. Just, can you go back to the table of the hierarchy? Okay, what, if this looks like it was put together by a regulatory, an NRC group, if I start looking down at tier 3 and tier 3 in particular, why is that? I mean, this should not be a regulatory document.
Well, it's not, Steve. I put it together.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
But you're talking about reg guides and standard review plans.
This is just an example of kind of where I felt things like would fall. You've got your technology, your high level requirements, and they may be more than 30.1, 30.2 show up in that tier 1. Tier 2 is basically the standards themselves, technology specific standards, and then below that you've got the stuff that start implementing that are related to those technology specific standards, including some cross-cutting stuff. And then you drop down the next thing, which is the other SDOs that have a dog in the fight too. And they may be technology specific or cross-cutting as well. So it's just, I didn't mean for it to mean this is more important than the other. It's just, that seemed to me that the logical flow of information as it would flow from the top to the bottom.
Yeah, no, it wasn't the logic or the hierarchy. It was the fact that it was looking very regulatory.
Well, I'm sorry. I'll try to figure out some way to unregulatory it then.
Okay.
And Mark, I don't know if you noticed, but we do have a question in the chat.
Okay.
Would you like me to read it? Or it's from Michael, I think it's Mazika, if you might want to address this question.
Okay. Okay, sorry that I joined so late, but you may have covered this issue already. This is related to meteorology and climatology data, matter discernment. As a matter of discernment, those data in and of themselves are not risk-informed performance-based concepts. Rather than the need for such data and info is what the risk-informed performance-based and is what is decided by others. Actually. Okay, I think this will be at a lower level than what 30.1 is addressing. This will be down in tier 2 or tier 3, probably down in 3 or 4. Okay, so yeah, this is more design specific information that is addressed than is addressed in 30.1.
Yeah, this is Mike Mazeka. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to get that issue out. I'm sitting on the working group for meteorological data for, I guess it's 2.21 met data used for ultimate heat sinks, and we had to draw that distinction in drafting the reg guide, and it's with the ESCC, I guess, right now. And there was discussion as to whether or not the data itself or obtaining the data was subject to RIPB. And I guess the working group, but I'm speaking for myself, that it's not. And I think that's also going to be reflected in the MET information for nuclear facilities, that obtaining the data is not, but the need for it is. And other people determine that. So I just wanted to throw that thing out there.
Yeah, let me just go ahead and spring off that. You can make, on this, continue looking at this hierarchy, you can make an argument, and maybe there's a gap here that needs to be that's missing, a gap that's missing, that's good. Instead of this 30.2, which is going to be a cross-cutting standard, maybe that belongs down in underneath as part of the tier 3 cross-cutting standards for advanced reactors. And what you were talking about then would appear there, and that standard would then provide a discussion on cross-cutting that the meteorological data and its application and obtaining is not risk-informed performance-based, and that will be part of your standard. It will sit down in tier 3 and be a cross-cutting standard across all reactor technologies.
And that might apply to other ologies as well. Again, I'm only speaking with respect to climate data and meteorological data that drives dispersion modeling.
Mm-hmm. Again,
but I think it's an important concept that we don't get trapped into a one-size-fits-all, for lack of a better phrase, thinking.
Again, the standards board wanted to think in terms of a hierarchy that was flexible and adaptable, and it may be that what I presented here may need to be modified a little bit to begin addressing issues like you just brought forth.
No, thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for the opportunity to let me raise it.
Mark, this is Don Spellman, may help raise his question or his answer, is that ANS has a whole consensus committee group that addresses all of those types of issues under Carl Mazzola. And I would say that those issues that Mark is concerned about will end up in ANS and other SDO standards down in tier 3 and tier 4.
There you go.
Let's see.
Okay, thank you.
He has his hand up.
Thanks, Don. You said it better than I said it.
So I think Prasad mentioned my name. It's Dennis. So Dennis Haneke with GE Hitachi, and as many of you know, we at GE are supporting the risk-informed design for 3 reactors: versatile test reactor, Atrium reactor with TerraPower, and of course the X300. And you know me as a detractor of 30.1, and I just want to clarify. I really think this document could do a lot of good if it standardized the way we do this. And standards should, in general, standardize the process by which we already utilize, or something close to that, if we're looking to improve slightly on the way we've done business in the past. And GE, we've been doing risk-informed design here for 25 years, and more recently with the ESPWR, and now with our new reactors. My issue with the standard under section 4, the actual requirements for system engineering, principal design criteria, structured defense in depth, and event sequence assessments, is it describes a high-level area of analysis, which is great, but it describes it in a way that doesn't represent anything close to what we do now, either in a risk-informed approach like licensing modernization process, the project LMP, or in a different approach, like you may have seen during the Wednesday advanced reactor meeting, where NEI presented 4 possible approaches to license a plant, which includes the risk-informed licensing and risk-informed design. And it doesn't represent any of the 4 approaches that NEI described. So I'm definitely commenting on all that the system engineering process, understand PDCs and defense depths. I can describe what we do and describe why what's written there doesn't match what we do. Where I'm having trouble understanding is section 4.4, which is event sequence-based assessments. I've done event sequence-based assessments for our fuel facility and for countless reactors. And in support of the design assessment, supported the deterministic evaluations, semi-risk informed evaluations, and so on. I just don't understand what you're describing there, and is there an example of this type of event sequence evaluation somewhere out there that you are standardizing, that we did this for reactor X, or we did this, or this is described in document Y? So is that described somewhere else, or it's just kind of new text that you
This is not
developed?
It's sequence based. It defined it: initiator event, failures and successes, and an end state. And that's
what's the basis? Where's
it also said that's the standard output from a PRA, is it not?
Except that section doesn't require a PRA. That as you said, a PRA is not required. So LMP requires a PRA, and that's an event sequence-based assessment.
Barrier analysis starts with an initiator, the barrier, and then the end result.
So can you reference a document that would describe the assessment that you're requiring in your standard? All I'm asking for is a reference that describes what you're standardizing.
All four of these process elements speak in general terms. They're not referencing any specific methodology or process. If you have a detailed process that you use that evaluates your design information and your accident information through an initiator, success or failure information, and an end state, you satisfy the standard.
When I read it, no, that's not what if I do LMP and I read that against 4.4, I don't meet 4.4. Other than the first shall statement that says you shall evaluate your design against your event sequence information. It's very general shall. But then when you describe it underneath, LMP doesn't meet that. It doesn't meet what's described there.
I beg to differ with you. Maybe we agree to disagree.
We were the pilots on LMP. I know LMP as well as anybody in the country. I can tell you it doesn't meet it. I don't know why you wouldn't believe me on that. And if you were trying to match LMP, then it should just match LMP. If you're trying to create something different, then match it.
I did not try to match LMP. I've done an evaluation that demonstrates LMP is not in conflict with it, 30.1 and vice versa.
Well, until you match the process with what we do in the industry today, maybe slightly improved over what we're doing today, but until the shall statements match what we do today, then it's not going to pass. The industry has to stand behind this, and it has to match something we can do. And there are 4 ways we do it, and you can look at the NAI presentation from Wednesday's Advanced Reactor presentation. So there isn't a single way out there, but we're using multiple ways at GE. But until it matches something that I can say, yep, okay, reactor X meets this standard, or is pretty close, and we have to do these slight modifications because they're really good ideas. But until it does that, how do you expect success?
You were imposing on processes on something on a standard that doesn't have processes in it. The standard, it says at the last slide, people are imposing thoughts on the process, on the standard that doesn't exist. They're not applicable.
That's not imposing. I'm just asking you to standardize what we do. That's what a standard is for. It's a standardization of a process, and it standardizes industry practice.
We have 50 years of PR experience.
And I have 40 of them myself.
We have 50 years of PRA experience.
Yep.
And I said, in the standard says that for 50 years of experience says these 4 items are what you need to have a robust, risk-informed, performance-based design. Those process elements. How you implement those process elements may be widely variety, and it may evolve within a single design process. But that's those process elements, those philosophies, those pieces of information, however you derive the end result, are needed. Now, if that 50 year, if I'm incorrect, if the working group is incorrect, that there's more than these 5, there may be 6, there may be 7 coming out of the PRA experience of 50 years. There may be 3, there may be one that needs to be dropped and another one added before, whatever that is. It's these 4 process elements: a system engineering process, principal design criteria, structured and systematic defense in depth. We can't do defense in depth the way we did before. That's been acknowledged.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
agree.
LMP said. That's what LMP
I agree.
said. So it has to be structured and systematic. It can't be just what I think is good enough. That's all that says. How you do how you form a structured and systematic defense in depth is your own personal is the vendor's problem and prerogative. It's just you have to have.
Except there are 30 shout statements in the document with a bunch of other caveats, and there's not a prerogative in it. There are shout statements and there are requirements, and if the shout statements describe something we can't meet or don't meet, if we have to do something differently than anybody else is doing, then it's not a correct standard.
Pat, I think we are approaching the end of the hour. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and participating in the discussion. And we will be letting you know about the next Community of Practice event, which will happen on the last Friday of September. Again, thank you all. Have a happy and safe weekend. Bye.
Great job, Mark.